Postgres is the most popular database out there. If you're a startup, if you're somebody who's starting something new, chances are that you are doing it on Postgres. And this database is so versatile that I wanted to create this one video where I wanted to show you how this can be used in so many different ways and how I am using it in my current company as well. There are many things to talk about, and you would consider probably that Postgres is just a database, but trust me, it is so much more than that. When we go inside Postgres, there are so many things to explore and so many things that you would appreciate about this database. Now I'll start with some of my favorites inside of Postgres, and then we will take a look at everything else that is also possible with just Postgres alone and nothing, any other thing other than Postgres in your stack. The first question that you might think is that why even use Postgres for more than just a database? And it's a valid question. It is something that anyone should ask and should know the answer to. And the thing is that if you are at small scale, like if you are not doing a lot of IO operations, input output operations on your database, you don't have that many users, you are just starting off, maybe have like a few thousands or tens of thousands of users, you don't have a huge load, a huge scale, you can go much faster by doing everything inside of Postgres itself than having 10 different services like an SQS for queuing, Redis for caching, all of these stuff. Now there are drawbacks to everything that I'm telling you because obviously we are tweaking Postgres in a way for making it possible to use it in a specific way, and I will list those drawbacks as well as we are discussing about the features. But these drawbacks are minimal if your scale is not that large, if your scale is relatively small. Now the first and most important thing that I really like is that you can use Postgres as a queue, and this is very interesting, and let me show you how this is done. So in case of Postgres, what you can do is you can get this table, this nice little table that you have over here, and all the rows that are coming inside this Postgres, these rows could be more or less items inside of a queue, right? So you'll have these bunch of items coming in, and this effectively can be your queue. Now one of the specialities of a queue system whenever you're using queue is that there could be multiple consumers. So this queue could be linked to probably multiple workers. Let's say this is worker 1, this is worker 2, and all of these workers are supposed to do something with the items inside queue, and they're supposed to like update it back, right? Like whatever the work is done. This can be beautifully achieved without workers or without these systems actually causing problems. Actually, because what you don't want is you don't want worker 1 and worker 2 to both pick item 1, right? So you want every single item to go to just a single worker. And to ensure that, there is a syntax called as for update skip locked, right? Without going into details of internals like how Postgres works, this is a Postgres feature, a native feature. You don't need any extension or anything. When you use something like this, what you can have is a column here. So you can have like a new column here, which could be like a status column. And this status column over here can have few values depending on your workload, obviously. Pending, processing, successful, failure, right? Let's say these are like 4 states. Every item inside your Postgres goes into pending state first, then you move it to processing inside of this for update skip locked, right? Then you move it to successful or failure depending on the job result. The way this syntax works is that you can have multiple workers polling your database at a very high rate, right? You can have like this worker, let's say, polling your database once every 3 seconds or 4 seconds that do I have any work? Do I have any work to do? And you can have like 100 such databases, right? Because this is effectively just a read call. And if I have any work, you will do like an update call, which will use this for update skip lock status, and it will move the work from pending to processing. And this is guaranteed in Postgres that if all of them are also working together, like all of them are hitting the database simultaneously, tell me what to pick, tell me what to pick, tell me what to pick, and all of these workers are doing that, it's guaranteed that Postgres will assign this record when you do it properly only to the first worker, right? And I can make a tutorial on this, like how do you actually implement it, but we have more things to cover, so I'll just leave it to this. So obviously this for update skip locked is a very native feature. It's like a very low level feature inside Postgres for building on queues. So what you can also do is look into these extensions. This extension called PGMQ, for example, it's a lightweight message queue like AWS SQS and RSMQ, but on Postgres. And it of course builds on top of what I've told you right now, and it has like a bunch of more features. It is an extension, but it is using internal Postgres things only. Now, one thing which I want to just let you know is that there is also a listen and notify syntax inside of Postgres, which is something I would not recommend because this is a performance bottleneck, right? Even at relatively small scales. I have seen like for update skip locked working beautifully, even if you are getting like, 10,000 records per minute or 20,000 records per minute as well. I have seen this like with our own system. This operates smoothly, no problems. But listen and notify is a bottleneck, right? So I would probably suggest not using this. All right, second thing that I like and that you should know about Postgres is unlocked tables. Extremely underrated, extremely underappreciated. And what this allows you to do is build features like caching inside Postgres. It also allows you to build things like rate limiting, right? So you can use literally a Postgres table for caching or for rate limiting or for both if you're using an unlocked table. Now let me tell you about what are the benefits and what are the drawbacks here. So unlocked table is basically just like a regular table. So you can do everything that you are doing on a regular table over here. But in case of unlocked, this table is actually not written to the write ahead log, which is the wall file, right? So wall file is a file which is very very critical for every single database, right? So all the tables, before there is any operation done on them, like a write operation, it will write it to the wall file first. This wall file is then used to do further propagation. Imagine that you have like some read instance or some other standby instances that need to synchronize with, what's going on in your database, or even for performance reasons, right? You want to check like what's going on. Then this is the source of your truth. Let's say if your database crashes while that transaction or something is happening, then this wall file is used to reconstruct all of that data and all of that information, right? Because this is the source of truth. Now, if this file itself is not something which is available on unlock table, what that effectively means is that if you are on a regular table like this, when you place a write, it will do it on wall and then it will commit. The write is done on the table. If you do it on an unlock table, it will not write or it will not wait for wall file to commit. It will not do that in the first place. So there is no wall write in case of unlock table, which is a massive performance boost for write operations, right? Because this is a bottleneck. I mean, it's not exactly a bottleneck. This is like a necessary evil that you have to do. But if you say that, okay, I'm okay with that, this table to be highly unreliable and this table could be nuked. I don't care. Like if my database crashes or something happens, I don't care if I lose data inside this table, then you can do that, which is a perfect candidate for caching or rate limiting, right? If you're caching something, because you're anyway going to query your database, primary database itself, you can put this in unlock table. Similarly for rate limiting as well, where you have to make sure that, if you have like a rate limit on a per endpoint basis, per IP or per user ID, you can use unlock tables for that. Now, I'm not saying, again, just a caveat here, I'm not saying that any of this is going to be faster than Redis. It will definitely be at least some millisecond, maybe like 1 or 2 milliseconds slower than Redis. But in my experience, I have seen with smaller workloads, this is as good as Redis. If you have just a few thousand users, if you don't have a lot of workload going on, this is as good as using Redis. The strong advantage you get over not using Redis is that you just have one less thing to worry about. You don't have to worry about Redis. You don't have to worry about its connection string, the variables. You don't have to worry about it getting hacked, it getting exposed on internet. You only have to secure and harden your primary database, and rest of the stuff would work performance-wise exactly the same as you have Redis, right? Again, I'm giving it again as a disclaimer that as you scale up, you would probably want to have a separate Redis instance for caching or for, ordered sets or whatever features you're using inside Redis as a data structure. This is not a replacement. This is just a quick strategy. If you are using Redis only for these two things, and if you do have a Postgres, maybe you can replace it. Third thing that I like about Postgres, which is also very useful, it's going to be useful for a lot of AI startups, is the extension called PG Vector. So PG Vector, what it does allow you is basically it allows you to create a column inside Postgres, which is of a vector type. Now, if you don't know about vector, what vectors are in general, let me give you a small introduction to that. It's actually very interesting, very exciting, but there are, this is out of the video scope for me to discuss like how exactly this works. But imagine that these are two axes, right? This x-axis is something, let's say, which determines the speed of the language, right? And this y-axis is something which determines the ease of use, right? Let's say ease of use of programming language. And now you have to plot a bunch of languages on this graph. So let's say I put JavaScript somewhere here. Let's say I put Golang somewhere here, and so on and so forth. So let's say I keep on plotting these values, right? Over here inside of a graph. Now, let's say I ask you a question. I ask you like a bunch of questions, right? I ask you which is the quickest language, right? And let's say if I ask you questions like which is a language even 50 IQ person can learn, right? A bunch of these questions. So I'm not asking you directly which language is easy or hard, like which is fast. I'm asking it in a different way. So what a vector space in a way allows you to do is that it will create semantic understanding of the objects that you have placed inside that vector space, right? So this is how large language models also work in a way that they have these axes, or they have like these hundreds, thousands, billions of dimensions rather, right? There are so many dimensions where they'll keep on placing those concepts that they understand or that they know about, right? An apple, a tower, a programming language, anything. So it is available inside all of these vector spaces, and then they will use these words, whatever questions they are, to figure out where do they have to go inside that vector space, right? So quickest probably would go more towards X side and not so much towards the Y side. 50 IQ, because this is a low IQ count relatively, it will go more towards the ease side, right? So what happens is that there's a concept known as semantic search, right? Semantic search inside Postgres and in general also, which is a concept which uses vectors, which we are talking about. So this is like one of the AI things, right? So semantic search uses vectors heavily because instead of just searching on text-based information, like I am asking about ease keyword or speed keyword, I'm actually looking for the meaning based search, right? So 50 IQ means that I want an easy language. Quickest means that I want a faster language. So this is where Postgres can use vector space inside of a single column. It can feed and it can store that information and it can retrieve the result as well, right? So the idea here is that you can use this PG vector instead of having a dedicated database for doing vector computations. Again, there are performance implications. PG vector and Postgres is not the best way if you are doing like a lot of queries per second on vector spaces. But if you're just building a simple search app, which like would probably get maybe a few hundred users concurrently maximum out of the whole application, then why not do this in the first place? Like if it's an internal tool or something that you're building for just your team, then you can use this. The fourth use case again, which somewhat stems from what we have already discussed over here in a way, is just using Postgres as a KV store, right? I'm surprised that a lot of people actually don't do this in the first place. You will have some other third-party thing, or maybe like using Redis as a KV store, but you can just use Postgres as a KV store, right? All you'll have to do is obviously have a KV table, whatever your name should be semantically for it to make sense for you. And you can just have literally like very simple key as the column and value as the second column, right? Now, granted, both of them have to be string, so you're not getting a lot of flexibility here in terms of the data types, but you can build abstraction over it inside of your code base, right? So you can create a small abstraction, which is like get from KV and set in KV, which under the hood uses the same Postgres infrastructure that is, in the rest of your database. This has a bunch of advantages. Again, like if you're using Redis or something dedicated for KV, it replaces that. You can just use your Postgres. Second is that KV generally is built for very high reads, which is what Postgres generally is good at, right? You'll probably not be doing a lot of writes on KV store, because if you're doing that, then it's probably again not a good idea to do that. Postgres generally is not a good database if you want to do a lot of writes, right? But again, everything depends on your scale. I would give you a quick number, a quick metric to keep in mind is that if you're doing probably less than 50,000 daily active users, you would be borderline okay with Postgres, right? Post this, maybe depending on your activity and maybe depending on like how interactive and how much they are hitting the database. Again, this is not like a hard figure, but I feel that most workloads, the way they work and the CRUD nature and the things that they have, even at very high concurrency, you can have like a decent Postgres instance that can go a very long way in doing all of these replacements, all of the stack replacements for you. So yeah, coming to the KV store itself, again, very simple implementation. Just use Postgres table for this. Store a key, store a value, create an index on key, obviously goes without saying, and just use that. Fifth and the final point that I have for you is that you can actually store native real JSON inside Postgres. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this, because if you can define your workload, then it should probably be in like column-based database only, like a tabular database. But it's completely possible, completely fine for you to create a table which is storing JSON as the data, right? And this data is not just text, it's actual JSON object stored inside of a column, right? So this column inside, this would be like a JSON aware column. So you can index the data, you can query the data inside of JSON, so you can extract like specific values if you want, and you can also modify this data in place. Now again, this is something for, if you're using like a document DB or like a sort of like a MongoDB, because you have a lot of JSON data and you want to do a bunch of queries and aggregations. It will not be as powerful as a document DB for aggregations and query. But again, I'm just spitballing here. I'm just giving you some ideas on things you can do with Postgres and replace your existing stack. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below your best trick with Postgres. I know I have not discussed a lot of extensions of Postgres. These are more or less the core features. There are a lot of sweet extensions in Postgres as well, which allow you to do OLAP workloads also, for example, instead of OLTP, which we have discussed, which integrates with ClickHouse. This is something I discussed like a couple of weeks back. So yeah, there are a lot of things that you can do further. Do let me know in the comments what do you think. That's all for this one. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. If you're still watching, make sure you leave a comment, "I watched till the end" below to tell me that you were still here, and let me know what do you think about the video.